So far, when we've talked about bones deforming a mesh, we've talked about the process of forward kinematics. That is, a bone like this one in the center would then impact the bone position in the one after it, and the one after it, and the one after it. But most specifically, forward kinematics means I would have to move this bone to impact that bone, to impact that bone, to impact that bone. It flows forward in the chain in terms of influence. From the parent down through the children. Now there's a method of rigging and preparation called inverse kinematics, meaning you don't animate from the parent, but you animate from the furthest child in the string of bones. And that looks something like this, where I can grab the head here and I can move the head around, and based on its position, it creates the bend automatically. Now this is great for things like tails and antenna, and sometimes even arms, legs, and feet. But it takes a little bit to set up this system. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording for a moment, and I'm going to remove all of the inverse kinematic features, and then we're going to add those step by step throughout the course of this video. Alright, I've returned my tube to its original state, which is the forward kinematics, meaning if I wanted to get that bend, of course, I'd have to bend all of these one by one by one. Let's set up the inverse kinematic approach. To start, we're going to have to create a target bone, meaning what is the thing on the end of our chain that's going to control everything in between. So I typically do this by grabbing the very last bone in my chain, and I hit Shift D for duplicate. So let's get into, I'm in pose mode, let's get into edit mode, sorry about that. Edit mode, Shift D to duplicate, and you'll see I created a new bone 10. Oops, I'm moving all over the place. Let's hit escape, and that just drops the bone in place. So Shift D to duplicate, escape or right mouse button click should let go of that bone. I can see now I have bone.010. Let's rename that, and we'll call this IK target. And then I'm going to move that bone just off the end of the chain, so that way it's extended past the end of our chain. Second thing I want to do is, if you notice, there's still this like dotted line on our bone, and that means that it's still connected to our parent-child relationship, and we don't want that for our IK chain. We want it to be disconnected. So pressing Alt-P will bring up the clear parent dialog, and we want to just clear parent. That way when we move this bone, it's going to be completely separate from the parent chain, and we can see that up here as well. All right. Now to help us understand that this is our IK target, I'm going to create a custom view for this one, just so it looks a little different than the rest of our bones. And we'll do this in pose mode. And with the armature selected, with that bone selected, I can go down to viewport display, over in my bone properties, and then I can see custom object, where I can select any object I want to be the graphic representation of that IK bone. And this is helpful later just to make it a little bit bigger, but also just to make it look different than the others, since this is going to be the one that controls our noodle. So let's go ahead and go into object mode, add a mesh to serve as that graphic. I'm going to use an icosphere. And I place the icosphere anywhere in my scene because I'm going to end up turning this off. I'm going to hide it, but I just need something as a reference object for that bone. So now that I've got my object, I can go back into pose mode. Let's grab our armature, pose mode, grab the end bone, make sure it's the IK bone. So if you want to scroll open your poses and everything, make sure IK target is selected. Custom object, go ahead and click on icosphere 001, and sure enough, there it is. Now I already had an icosphere in my scene from when I worked on this last time, so icosphere or icosphere 01 is fine in my case, but whichever you choose or whichever you create, make sure you turn off hide in viewport and render, because you don't want the reference image displayed in your viewport or in your render. So now my end piece looks a little something like this. I can scale it, I can do all kinds of good things with it. I'll make it about that big. Let's make sure it's still rounded though. So now I've got this really nice visual display at the end of my string that's going to tell me what to grab to make my cool chain work. All right, next steps, we have to actually rig up the IK chain. To do that, we're going to open up our armature. I want to get all the way down to the very last bone in my chain, or I can simply select that last bone. In my case, this is bone 09 or 009. And then I'm going to go to the bone constraints, and I'm going to add a bone constraint to this chain called Inverse Kinematics. So go down to your bone constraints in the object properties, add constraint Inverse Kinematics. And Inverse Kinematics is going to set up that relationship between this bone and the root. And so first we need to tell this constraint what to impact. So it is going to impact the entire armature. So target is armature. The bone that it is going to use as its IK target is the IK target. And that's going to take care of most of the effort. Now, when you move the IK target, which is this icosphere, you're moving the entire chain. But where the magic happens is if you start to scrunch this up, it is going to auto-bend your bone chain in the smoothest way possible to create that bend. So again, great for tails, great for antenna, great for arms, great for fingers, all kinds of good things, right? So we're no longer going to be messing with these bones. We can mess with them still, but the overall impact is going to be controlled by our icosphere. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to create a pull target. So for example, if I bend my icosphere down, it creates this kind of question mark like shape. But what if I didn't want that? What if I wanted the bend to be down below, kind of like an upside, or like a U shape, a letter U? I could grab these bones and I could try to move them around, but you can see that it does some really weird, nasty tearing. So it's not a really great solution. What we can do is we can create another bone, and we can use this pull target option as kind of like an extra controller for the bend. And here's what that looks like. I'm going to back off my movements here. I'm going to go all the way back to leaving this kind of unbent. Or let me just see, if I grab my icosphere, if I hit Alt P to reset, no, that's going to propagate. Let's do Alt G to remove any grab operations. That'll put it back to its original state. All right, now I want to add the pull object. And so I'll grab one of these bones in the center, and I'm going to do the same thing as I did before in edit mode. I'm going to choose Shift D to duplicate. I'll move it off to the side. I'm going to press Alt P to unparent, clear parent. And that's going to get it in position. Then I'm going to rename this bone Pull Target. And that might be a little bit of a confusing name because the pull target's actually going to end up being the armature, but you'll see where I'm going with this. And then I'm going to go back into pose mode, and I'm going to change this bone also to use a custom icosphere. So I'll go back into, let's see, its bone, custom object, and we'll go to icosphere 001. Scale that down. And we'll just leave this kind of hovering here for now. It's an okay position. Then let's go to our bone with the constraint on it. So that was my bone 009. And it already had the IK constraint on it. And I want to find pull target. Pull target, once again, is going to be the armature. It's going to control everything. And then the bone is going to be that pull target bone. So that's why I say it's a little confusing. I call them the pull targets just because I know that's what I'm going to use it for, but the pull target is actually the armature. Please don't set pull target to the bone. You won't get the results that you want. And then we may need to mess with some of these settings, but let's make some changes here first. Let's bend this shape down. Not bad. Let's bend it over. Let's kind of start our question mark. And then if we did this right, our pull target is going to allow us to move this around in real time. Let's go to my full view here just so I can show you kind of the 360 view. All right, so this guy is going to impact, based on where it is, the bend. So if I want to bend this down, I probably need to move this guy down a bunch and then this guy down, and it'll push that further down in space. So that's what the pull target's going to do, is it's going to allow you to, there we go, it's going to allow you to change where the bend happens by using this kind of, we'll call it a third-party object. And then you can get a lot of different results and kind of control where your bends occur. We're going to use this in future lessons to control things like where the elbow bends or where a knee bends, but that's the pull target feature. There's an IK setup. It's pretty quick. If you don't get the results you want as you're setting these up, take a few steps back and walk through it very carefully. It can be pretty tedious to make sure that you're selecting the right thing, unparenting, that sort of thing, making sure the constraint is on the right bone. So take it carefully through these steps and you should get results that you're after.